I'm Sari Mitnick, and this is Seamwork Radio, where we tell stories about the surprising ways that sewing impacts our lives. Welcome back to Seamwork Radio, everybody. So today we are talking about mood boards. Yay! I love talking about mood boards. So we are celebrating the first week of this season's Design Your Wardrobe session. And if you don't know what Design Your Wardrobe is, we talked about it a little bit last week, but it's a 3-week interactive class, and it helps you to plan a seasonal wardrobe that you're going to sew. So it's really fun, and a really huge number of people from our community participate. It's free if you're a Seamwork member. So you can do it twice a year with us if you're a Seamwork member. You can also do it at your own pace at any time if you're a Seamwork member. So if you are interested in that, go to seamwork.com/wardrobe if you want to learn a little bit more about that. And this week in Design Your Wardrobe, we're talking about mood boards. So we thought we would talk about it here on the podcast too, because it's such a fun subject. So we're going to cover different goals that you might have for using a mood board, what you can include in a mood board that you might not have thought about already, and how to use them not just as a tool for design, but also as a tool for self-exploration. So to start us off with our icebreaker for today, our icebreaker for makers, Haley, have you ever made a mood board that really impacted you?
Yeah, I would say so. I'm like a mood board machine. Part of my job requires me to make mood boards very regularly. And my background is in apparel design. I studied fashion design when I was in college. And when you're being trained as a fashion designer, your focus is learning to build styles around a brand identity. You're really focused on that. So that's something I became really good at. But never did I really explore my personal style in a way. It was just kind of like a more organic part of myself. And when I graduated from school, I don't know, a few years after, back in the days of the Colette blog, there was the Wardrobe Architect series, which if you are like an OG Colette person, you know what I'm talking about. But if you aren't, it was like a workshop that helped you kind of identify your personal style. The style workshop is very like similar. So if that sounds interesting to you, we'll link that in the show notes. But it was the first time that I really sat down and like took a really intentional look at my personal style. It really changed my perspective because so much of my creative energy was before that point was put towards building style and identity for other people. I think looking inward and thinking about that for myself changed my perspective. It made me a better designer.
Yeah. That's interesting that one influenced the other like that for you. Because I think most people, at least for us sewers, are probably a lot more used to making them if we make them for ourselves. So I think that's a unique perspective, the fact that you were more used to making them for, maybe a broader audience or a different audience and then made them for yourself.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you think about like when you see designers on runways after they show their collection, they have this like beautiful collection, really vibrant and strong point of view. And then lots of times they walk onto the runway and they're like jeans, black t-shirt. And I think that's kind of not all designers, but a point of view that a lot of designers have. And I was in my training, it was like really drilled into you that you were in most cases not your customer. So not to put yourself into that experience and remove yourself from it a bit. And I think in a lot of ways, that's a really good thing for designers to do. But I think that knowing your own personal style helps you to connect with people better in that way.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true.
What about you, Sari? You have any like meaningful mood boards in your life?
I do. I've made a lot of mood boards in my time. Normally, I think most of them have been sort of in the Design Your Wardrobe vein, which is, for my own sewing and I've done them for work as well, but mostly around, kind of fashion and creating cohesive collection or something in that line. But the thing that I think has been really impactful for me is, as you know, Haley, I feel very strongly about visioning for the future, and really as a communication tool, and in order to get clear with yourself on what you want for the future. So that's something that I use a lot, and I use both words, storytelling, and also visuals for that at different times, depending on what I'm doing. And most recently, when we started looking for a new house, and we were looking for something that basically looking for a whole new lifestyle, on our first meeting with our realtor, he said, one thing I find really helpful is if clients can create some kind of a picture or a vision of what they really want their life to be in this new house. I thought, well, yeah, I can do that. I have a lot of experience doing that. That's my specialty. So I created, kind of a painted picture of what my new life might be like and what I was looking for, with both words and then also with images. I created some mood boards to kind of describe a day in the life in this new lifestyle. And it was so helpful on so many levels. It was helpful because for me, it really helped me to get clear on what I was looking for and what was important to me in looking for a new house. For my realtor, it really gave him an idea of what we were looking for and what was important. So it was a communication tool with somebody else as well. And then it actually helped us a lot in actually buying the house, because right now the housing market is really insane. And it's very difficult to buy a house. And when we did find our house, our realtor sent over the vision that I had created, and it resonated so much with the sellers that I'm sure there were other factors, but our offer was accepted. And I think there were 5 or 6 offers, and we got to meet them when we closed, and they really felt strongly. They'd built the house themselves. They really, had a lot invested in this house, had a lot of emotions about this house. And so being able to share that story with them really made them feel like it was in the right hands and that we would be good stewards of the land and the property. It was a way that we really were able, even though, in a real estate transaction, you're not really directly meeting with the buyer or the seller until it's closed. We actually were able to form a relationship with them through this process. And so I think that's actually a vision board or a mood board or whatever you want to call it, that actually I think really changed my life in a way and had a huge impact. So I feel even more strongly about them than I did before this.
Yeah, definitely. I think that line between mood board and vision board sometimes can be blurry, or call it what you want to. But yeah, vision board, as woo-woo as that might seem to some people, I think that if you strip it down to a vision, it can be powerful for any number of things.
Yeah. One thing I want to point out is that I don't think it's something that's magical or something. Yeah. It's not like you're willing it into existence in my mind, or it's, I don't know what they call that, manifestation.
Yeah.
Yeah. I understand some of the things behind that, but for me, that doesn't resonate. For me, it's more a way to explore what I really want and to understand with myself what I'm looking for, and then communicate that to somebody else. I think for me, it's that simple. And I think stories and pictures are a great way to do that.
Yeah, definitely. It's a great decision-making tool for sure.
So that's my story. That's how my mood board has changed my life. But I'm really interested to hear what other people say. So if you have had a mood board or a vision board or something in that line that has changed you or really impacted you, we'd love to hear about it. So you can let us know. You can leave us a review and let us know, or you can find us on Instagram at Seamwork. And if you want to answer this question, then you can just hashtag it Icebreakers for Makers, and we would love to hear what you say.
Definitely. I think the big question about mood boards thoughts, besides being kind of like a visual guide, what do we think mood boards are? What is the goal of a mood board?
Well, I think we've touched on a few things.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and this idea of vision board versus mood board. And I don't think you have to make a clear distinction. I think it's whatever is really helpful to you and will help you fulfill your goals.
Mm-hmm.
I think some of the common themes for these kinds of tools are you're trying to invoke an emotion.
Mm-hmm.
So create some kind of a visual picture that will create the emotion that you want to create, whether that's in yourself
Mm-hmm.
or in somebody else or a group of people. So I think that's a big part of it. And visuals are so powerful when it comes
Mm-hmm.
to invoking emotion. I think they have so much power to communicate to yourself
Mm-hmm.
and to other people. I think another aspect is creating a story. So
Mm-hmm.
you're really, and that goes with the emotion part of it, right? You're creating some kind of a visual story, and maybe it incorporates words. Sometimes it incorporates words, sometimes it doesn't. But you're really trying to create a story that you can, again, communicate to yourself and communicate to other people.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's also a big function of mood boards. And then I think the thing we often think about with mood boards is inspiration, just visual inspiration, something that you can just look at and gather ideas from. So
Yeah.
I think
I think
emotion is a part of that.
Yeah. I think that your mood board could have any number of these goals that we've mentioned. And a good first step is just defining the goal for yourself. Maybe in this case, you want it to be more about telling a story and less about literal visual inspiration, and really like sitting down and identifying it. And I think it's going to be the more individual you make this experience, the more meaningful that it's going to be for you. And if it's meaningful, it's going to be useful. So I think kind of regardless of how you want your mood board to function for you, it can be really hard to think about what to include in your mood board so that it feels really inspiring, but it also feels well-rounded. I think that's a question in Design Your Wardrobe that I get all the time. How do I make a mood board? It's so hard to answer because it is really individual, but I think in this episode, we can give some good pointers that'll give you a good jumping off point.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to share some ideas for creating a more visually engaging mood board, because if you like looking at it, you're probably going to use it more. And Sari is going to share her tips for creating a more meaningful mood board. Hopefully one that'll change your life. Who knows? I might be overselling it. So yeah, like I said, I'm a very well-seasoned mood board maker. And I have a few tips and things that I like to include in my mood boards that I feel like make it more visually engaging to look at. So I'm going to kind of like ignore the like literal inspiration of pretty garments you see on Pinterest. That's valuable too, but I feel like that's not the part that people struggle with as much. My number one tip for creating a mood board that's more visually pleasing is include texture and color. I think people often will include fabric swatches, and that is a great place to start. But there's other ways that you can reference color and include texture. Something that I was taught in design school as a creative way to share a color palette is to use embroidery floss or thread kind of wound around pieces of cardstock to convey your color palette in a more textural way. There's any number of ways. You could do little embroideries or run your machine over a piece of muslin, like, machine stitch. That is a really great way to convey color in a textured way. Another great way is to include notions, trims, buttons, anything like that that can help to create a little bit more texture in your mood board. That is probably my top tip for creating an engaging mood board.
I think that brings up an interesting question, which is analog versus digital.
Oh, yes.
And how do you feel about that?
I think it kind of depends. If I'm making a more grand mood board for something like design your wardrobe, where I'm like really thinking big picture, I do like to work analog because then I can have it like kind of front and center in my life. The problem with creating digital mood boards sometimes is that we can forget about them. And then they're kind of like out in the ether. And so for me, when I'm practicing design your wardrobe, I like to create an actual physical one. But if I'm just creating like a quick mood board for like a little, I don't know, capsule collection, I'm going on vacay, then I might do like a quick little digital one.
I think another thing about digital versus analog is that digital doesn't really have any constraints on it. So you can just keep adding stuff to it and not eliminating anything. And I think that having those constraints can make you make more creative decisions.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really good point. I find that I'm much more creative when I've been given constraints.
Yeah, I think for me, I like digital for, like you're saying, for maybe things that are a little bit more casual or one-off, or for just collecting inspiration. But then if I really want to sit and think about it and really have it be something that's meaningful to me, it helps me to get analog.
Yeah. And then you get to kind of remove yourself from the screen and like sit down at a table with some paper and scissors and tape and kind of go for it. And, you know, I think removing yourself from the screen to do that creative work can be a really powerful tool.
Yeah, definitely.
Kind of draws that line between kind of like collection and then creation. Like you've finished the collection phase and now you're creating.
Yeah. That's an interesting way to frame your process too.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I mean, because an artist or a designer's work is never like truly done. You can keep adding and adding and adding. And there's a point where you kind of have to say like, okay, like, you know, moving things along. One designer to another. That's my tip for you. Keep it moving. My next tip number 2, is find other creative ways to inspire your mood board. I think a lot of people get really hung up on these like literal outfits that they find pictures of in magazines or on Pinterest that they want to recreate. Take yourself out of that and think about colors and textures that inspire you. I think a really great place to look is at art. I love looking at graphic design and like cool package design for inspiring color palettes and prints and textures. A lot of times when I'm planning a photo shoot, that is my jumping off point for the color palette that I want to use, is just a piece of art or a color palette. The Seamwork style is very well defined at this point. So I know the things that work and don't work. So sometimes just something as simple as finding a beautiful piece of art that you love the color palette of can really inform some of your decisions. Mm-hmm. And then my third and final tip, kind of riffing off the previous one, is landscapes are another, you know, either painted or photographs can be another great way to get inspired with color palette, but also it can evoke a place and a feeling and create more mood. And this really like transitions us really well into Sari's tips on creating a story with your mood board.
That's something that I feel really strongly about in when I create mood boards, is creating a sense of kind of what you were saying, Haley, going beyond the raw aesthetics and thinking about what it means to you. Mm-hmm. And, you know, this is kind of where it gets blurry again between mood board and vision board. And I don't think you have to choose one or the other. But one of the things that we talked about in our last episode, if you haven't listened to that one was about defining your core style when your life is changing. And I think thinking about your current life or your future imagined life, the places, the activities, yourself in the future can be really, really helpful. I think that brings an element of realism into what you're doing. And it also can kind of, I think, thinking about the future in terms of your own experience and your own life can really help to ground you when you're coming up with these big ideas. So that's one thing that you could incorporate. So maybe it would be pictures of places you want to travel, for example, or activities that you see yourself doing or that you want to do, or maybe even a picture that is inspiring to you for your future style in 10 years or something like that, but just kind of grounding it in your own life and your own possible future. So that's one thing. Another thing that we talked about in the last episode that I think you could incorporate is people that you admire. So I think that tells you a lot about what you value if you think about who you admire. And I don't just mean style-wise, although that is something you can definitely incorporate, and that might also tell you about what you value. We also talked about this a lot in the last episode and talked about some of our style icons that we don't just admire the way they look and the way they dress. We really admire their qualities, their personality, their creativity, their art. So we talked about people like Patti Smith and Joni Mitchell and Kate Bush, all musicians that we both really like. And I think that can also be something that you incorporate. I also, I'm thinking about a future mood board that I want to create. My new sewing room in my new house has a entire wall that's just covered in foam and fabric. So it's just like a wall-sized mood board because the former owner was also a sewer. And so I've been thinking about what I want to put there and thinking about people that I admire that I might include in kind of a mood board, vision board. And there are the people that I mentioned, but also, one of my heroes in life is Bruce Springsteen. I love Bruce Springsteen. As Haley knows, I'm a huge Springsteen fan.
She is. This is true.
So, and I think actually that does inform how I dress in some ways. I think all of these things are factors. So thinking about people you admire and the qualities that you admire in them. And I think that can be super, super inspiring to you. And then another thing you could incorporate, and Haley and I were talking about this before, this doesn't resonate with everybody, but I think including words or quotes that are meaningful to you, or even poems, or even maybe affirmations. We talked about sewing affirmations in one of our previous episodes. I think that can be a nice addition to creating a story for yourself. I like including a few, not too many, but a few words here and there, or quotes that really I want to be reminded of regularly, things that help me. That's something that can be really powerful. I don't know. Do you like including words and quotes in your mood boards, Haley?
I think it depends on the type of mood board. I do often, especially with the mood boards I create for seam work for our monthly photo shoots, I usually include 3 to 4 words, because I think that in the case of photo shoots, I am also communicating my vision to a photographer, a hair and makeup person, the model, person who's styling. And so having those words I can instantly kind of reach for are, I think, really important when I need other people to be on the same page as me. In my personal mood boards, I feel like I'm probably a little bit more likely to not include words, or if I do, they're going to be more like quotes, maybe a poem or something once in a while. Get like a little sprinkle, a little Mary Oliver in there.
Oh yeah, I love Mary Oliver.
Who doesn't?
Nobody. I think she's the most popular poet in the world or something like that.
I know. So I know it's basic, but she obviously speaks to a lot of people for a reason.
Yeah, I do love Mary Oliver. I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care if it's not cool. I was actually looking through one of the things that I also journal. And one of the things I was trying to do, I've kind of this has morphed over time, but I was trying to use a lot more visuals in my journal. And so at the beginning of each season, I was taking some photos, like, printing out some photos and poems and things like that, and keeping them in an envelope so that I could kind of use them throughout the season. So, I did this in the winter, and there were a lot of like kind of inspiring kind of wintry images that would just kind of, I don't know, I found it very grounding to kind of, especially in winter when and there's, sometimes it feels a little bit long and barren and cold to remind myself of the beauty of winter. So I was doing some of that, and I did find a Mary Oliver poem kind of buried in that envelope when I was packing. Her poem "I Worried" is one of my favorites. I really love that. So that was a little bit of a digression, but I do think that it can be, and maybe journaling is something that you could also incorporate mood boards into. I think it can be really, really powerful.
Definitely.
So another thing that you could incorporate are photos of your life, maybe a meaningful moment from your life. I think one of the things that I was reading something about positive affirmations recently, which I know can seem really hokey, but one of the things I was reading is that they're a lot more effective if you can actually connect them to things in your life. And, instead of just telling yourself, I'm an intelligent person, or I don't know what you might say to yourself, but something like that, to really connect it to an experience that you've had in the past, or something that's happened to you that makes you believe that. And that's a lot more powerful. And so I think the same thing can hold true here. If you can connect the story you're trying to create to things that are meaningful to you from your life, then I think it can be even more powerful and can help you to tell the story and kind of bring the experiences that you've had into the present moment and into the future that you're trying to envision. So I think that can be really helpful. Another thing is going beyond the just photos and things like that, like Haley was talking about. You could incorporate mementos and objects into your mood board. So maybe something that is meaningful to you, maybe a little shell from a trip that you took, or something that has a personal significance to you, just small objects you can incorporate into your mood board. Or if it's a larger object, maybe you could include a photo of it or something like that. I've mentioned on a previous episode that for my journal, I bought a little photo printer that prints like really tiny, like it could print, I think they're like 2x3 photos from your phone. And I love it. It's great because it's just really helped me to take more photos and to document my memories a lot more. And so you could do something like that if you have something that's meaningful to you that you want to include. And then, if there's anything else that really has symbolic meaning for you, you could include that too. If there's something that has just always been a symbol to you of, maybe strength, or a symbol to you of compassion, or something, a value that you have, and there's something that really symbolizes that to you, you could include that as well. It might not be a purely visual thing that you add to your mood board, but it can still help to invoke that story and that feeling that you want to create. So I hope that these have kind of broadened your horizons a little bit about what you could include.
Yeah, definitely. Do you have something like symbolic that you come back to time and time again? I'm curious.
Yeah, I think I do. I have a lot of symbolic jewelry. I really like that because it's something that I can wear every day. I have things that, for example, are heirlooms from my grandmother and my mom. My mom gave me her charm bracelet from when she was young, and there are a lot of things on it that kind of symbolize my family history. So I have some of those kinds of things, but there's also kind of more abstract symbols to me. There are some that are more maybe on a spiritual level, I would say, that have symbolic meaning to me. And then there are some that I think really just represent values that I hold. I've been reading, I like Greek and Roman mythology a lot. I studied Latin when I was in school, and that's something that it's just very, very rich with symbolism. I really love the Odyssey and the characterization of the goddess Athena in the Odyssey, because she is a symbol to me of strength and courage and compassion at the same time, and teaching. So I just have a wide range of of symbols in my life, and I think it's actually really helpful. I know it can seem a little bit like, if you're not that kind of person, I totally understand. For me, I like having concrete things that bring me back to myself and that ground me and that remind me of what's important. That's what's helpful about it to me. What about you? Do you have a lot of symbols in your life that
I have like probably two that I return to that the most often. The first one are poppies. Growing up, I spent a lot of time with my grandparents, and my grandfather, I called him Poppy. And
I called my grandfather Poppy too.
Yeah. And he is like one of the most important like figures in my life. And just now he's been gone for like 10 years now, but now poppies, the flower, really like symbolized to me like a strength and softness, because he was not like, he was like a veteran of World War II, but he wasn't like the typical person you kind of imagine of that era. He liked roses and wearing pink. And I think he was one of the first people in my life that I felt like he like really like kind of pushed these gender norms. Not like he made a big deal about it or talked to me about it, but really modeled that kind of thing and showed me strength and softness. So poppies symbolized that to me. And then another symbol I come back to are just like hands. And I think that it reminds me of the peace I find in using my hands.
Yeah. Hands and eyes, I think, are both very powerful symbols and can mean different things to different people.
Yeah, definitely.
It's so interesting thinking about that. When you're talking about your grandfather, I thought about my grandmother, who was one of my heroes in life, who passed away several years ago. And she, her favorite flower was hydrangeas, but she called them snowballs. So they always remind me of her, especially the blue ones. They just always remind me of my grandmother.
I love them so much. And one of my favorite things about them is their life and how they change over the course of the season. And they're really strong. They're sturdy, but they're so like delicate and beautiful. I see a lot of meaning in that.
Yeah. Yeah. I have dried hydrangeas right now all over my house. I love them. They're beautiful flowers.
Yeah. Little segue there, but a good one.
Yeah. So we've talked about quite a few things that you could include in your mood boards and kind of how to go beyond maybe what you think of as a mood board, go beyond thinking about just outfits you want to sew or outfits that you find inspiring or garments that you find inspiring, and really think about how you can tell a story to yourself or tell a story to other people through a visual language. And that can really go beyond creating something beautiful and really incorporate things that create meaning for you as well. So we've talked about, as far as visuals go, incorporating texture and color, like fabric swatches, notions, things like that. Art, graphic design, things that inspire color palettes for you, landscapes, things that can invoke a mood visually. And then we also talked about some things that maybe can invoke a story. So thinking about your current life, your imagined life, people that you admire, words, quotes, poems, photos of meaningful moments from your life, or maybe mementos or things that are symbolic to you. So those are all things that can be incorporated. But the real takeaway we wanted to give you guys is to just kind of think about how you can personally, what your goal is for your mood board, and then how you can personally bring a meaningful story to life through the visuals that you choose for it, and kind of open yourself up to some of these possibilities that go beyond Pinterest. So if you want to learn more about this, again, Design Your Wardrobe is available at seamwork.com/wardrobe. And it's running right now. We run it twice a year. And you can also, if you're a Seamwork member, you can actually do it on your own at any time as well. So you have access to it all the time. And part of that, we have a video of mood board tips that Sienna put together. So we'll put a link to that. It's in the Seamwork classroom on our website, and we'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. If you like this episode and you liked hearing about mood boards, let us know. We would love to know which episodes really resonate with you, because we'll do more of that. We love hearing from you guys, and it really helps us to hear what you like. So give us a review and let us know. That's it for us today. This was kind of a little bit of a long one, but I think it was a really good conversation.
Yeah, definitely. I enjoyed it. I hope you guys did too.
Yeah, go forth and create your mood boards. We'd love to see them. All right. See you guys next week.
Bye.
Seamwork Radio is brought to you by the Seamwork community, and you can find us at seamwork.com. If you have a story to share, send us an email at podcast@seamwork.com. We'd especially love to hear stories from those whose experiences often get left out of the conversation, whether because of race, gender identity, sexual orientation, disability, age, or any other reason. Again, that's podcast@seamwork.com. You can find us on Instagram at Seamwork and Seamwork Video on YouTube. We'd love to invite you to join us at seamwork.com. We have an amazing community there, as well as new sewing patterns and classes each month for members. Podcast listeners can get 50% off our unlimited membership, which gets you unlimited downloads from our library of over 150 wardrobe-building sewing patterns. Just visit seamwork.com/go/podcast50. You can also find that link in the show notes. And if you like this podcast, please consider giving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or the podcast app of your choice. It really helps other people to find the show so they can hear these stories too. Thanks for joining us, and we'll be back with you soon. I'm Sari Mitnick, and this is Seamwork Radio.